The night she didn't come home. I woke up to a space that didn't exist. Not in our apartment, not in our street, and yet it was everywhere in me like a truck in the distance. The clock on the bedside table was facing the wall. Emma had called early in the evening, a short message that the editorial meeting was running late, that they were probably ordering food that I shouldn't wait. I typed okay and put pasta on the table for myself and our son, who was eating in an arc of homework in crumpled paper airplanes. It was getting late and I left the lamp in the living room on, the way she likes to see home when she comes up the stairs. It stayed on for a long time. Finally, I fell asleep on the couch with my shirt open at the neck and the TV off as if I'd made myself pretty for someone who wasn't coming. My name is Tobias. I've long believed that the hardest part of a relationship is the big events, illness, money, the times when you have to move your childhood into your present. I hadn't considered that the hardest part might be everything that happens in between, the small distances that you don't measure because tape measures look so dramatic. Emma is an editor. She wears her phone like other people wear jewelry. I've always loved watching her work, the way her forehead creases when a sentence suddenly knows more than content. We met when I was selling books and she asked for something to take her mind off herself for an afternoon. We found addiction together, quietly and patiently. An apartment, a child, a balcony with herbs that survive more cold than they should. A life. The night she didn't come home started in the living room but ended in the yard. I sat down there with a blanket over my shoulders because I couldn't be in rooms where the lights made sense. Yard noises at night are always honest: distant steps, a door slamming, a glass set too gently on a tabletop as if someone was listening. My phone lay in my palm and I stared at its black screen, not allowing myself to press anything. I didn't want to be the one to call and create an explanation that was too easy. She didn't show up. She texted me briefly at dawn that she had fallen asleep in the office. I wrote good morning. I carried our son to school, bought bread, returned to an apartment that smelled of cold coffee and the rest of yesterday. It was morning and there she stood in the doorway, hair gathered, shirt crumpled at the sleeves, a smell of soap and citrus that wasn't ours. "I'm here," she said. I nodded. "I know." We kissed in the kitchen, the kind of kiss you give to erase, not to remember. "Shall I make tea?" I asked. "Yes," she said, and her voice cracked a little. It was so small a crack that only a person who has listened to that voice for more than a decade would hear it. I turned on the water and in the steam I suddenly saw us, two people in the mirror above the stove, our bodies close but not in the same place. I didn't ask many questions that day. We were working. We talked about our son's school festival and his new interest in geography, how he can sit with a map and dream, find a name like Almeria and say it over and over because it feels like licking a foreign sugar. In the evening we made pizza, which he likes with way too much cheese. Afterwards we lay on the floor and looked up at the ceiling, where the shadows of the plants on the balcony drew soft shapes. Emma was lying with her hand on my stomach. "Sorry," she said without looking at me. "For what?" I asked. "For nothing in particular," she said, "for all the undefined." The undefined began to take shape, days of meetings that didn't end. She said the word deadline with an ease I hadn't heard in her mouth before, as if the pressure had become a local anesthetic. A new dress I hadn't seen her try on. A pungent scent that settled in her scarf. It wasn't another man's scent, it was hers. But it wasn't the scent of our lives. It said, "Remember me," to someone who wasn't me. One evening I decided to drop by the editorial office. Not as a spy, I told myself, but as a man with flowers for his wife. I bought a small bouquet from the street corner, not roses, not theatrical, just 3 white hollyhocks that can stand in water for a long time and still look like they just came home. Most of the windows were switched off. A single room cast blue light onto the sidewalk. I walked up the stairs. The door was unlocked. Inside, there was the smell of paper and detergent and low music from a laptop. I walked down the hallway and in an opening I saw Emma sitting close to a man showing her something on the screen. They were talking in low voices. She put her hand on his forearm, a light, easy movement you only make when you forgot the world is watching. He turned and said something, and she laughed the way she laughed when we were in a bed that didn't know our names. I did not enter. I stood and let the inside pockets of my jacket soak up everything that would otherwise run out. When I turned around, the hollyhocks got a touch of cold, their stems stiffened. I thought, if you go inside, you'll be written in a scene. I went home and put the flowers in water. At night I lay next to her, counting the boards on the ceiling with my fingers, and realized that my way of holding things together was to give them names. I didn't name her cheating. I named us out of sync. It got worse before it got quiet. One morning in the shower, she put her forehead against the tile and breathed heavy, slow, like she was learning again. I stood behind her and let the water hit our shoulders. "What's his name?" I asked low, her shoulders tight. "Thomas," she said. I nodded, like the nod could make anything possible. "How long?" "Not long," she said, and in that moment I realized that time doesn't help. A night can be a landscape you never get out of. For the rest of that day, I did everything very calmly. I put plates on the table in a circle so neat that it had to mean something. I drove our son to soccer. He kicked low and sure as if the ground was a deal. I walked a lap around the lake. Leaves in water look like coins that have been dropped. When I got home, Emma was sitting at the dining table with her laptop. "I don't want to lose us," she said. "Then you have to lose him," I said. She looked up, and for the first time I saw a fear in her that didn't come from outside but from within. What if I can't choose right? In some novel I would have slammed the door, burned his initials into something. Instead, I went to the basement and found the old wooden bench that we had thrown aside because a leg was crooked. I dragged it up, sanded it smooth with sandpaper, and put it at the foot of the bed. It was to remind me that things can carry us again if you take your time. That evening, I put a cup of tea in front of Emma and told her that I had made a list, not of things she should do or regret. Of things I wanted to be able to say calmly, even when my body was screaming. It started with, "I believe you when you say you wouldn't hurt me." It continued with, "I also believe my body when it says it's hurt." We didn't stop touching each other, quite the opposite. We found our way back to the slow touches that don't have to lead anywhere in particular to make sense. I rested my cheek against her stomach as we stood in the hallway, and she touched the back of my neck with her lips as if it was a prayer. We looked at each other in the mirror, not to assess but to see if we were still there. "If we're going to start again," I said, "it has to be without crashing into each other. We have to stand upright next to each other." She smiled, a tired but genuine smile, and her hand found mine. "Stand together," she said, "not on top." A few days later, there was a knock on the door. Thomas was standing outside. He looked like someone who had been sent into town for an apology and had forgotten the shopping list. "I just want to," he began. "No," I said, not harshly, "just the postcard. This isn't your kitchen." He nodded and walked down the stairs, one step at a time, like he was getting to know them. We spent a night in a hotel, Emma and I, not to recreate anything but to be in a place where the walls don't remember. We told our son we were at work, which in a sense was true. The room smelled of fabric and wet glass. Emma stood by the window, the city reflected in her shoulder. I walked over, put my hands around her waist. We kissed quietly. I let my fingertips follow the line of her shirt buttons. She put her forehead against mine again, not moving, just letting her breath get warm between us. There was a time when I wanted more and faster. Now I wanted everything slower, smarter. I kissed her collarbone and she sighed, a small, low sound that comes when something falls into place. We stood there for a long time, and when we finally lay down, it wasn't something I would tell strangers in detail. But I can say that we chose it together and that we stopped in a place where both of us could say more another day without feeling lost. The next morning we walked through the city and bought cinnamon gifts, ate them on a staircase, and drank 2 strong coffee from cardboard. She took my hand. It was a movement I thought I knew, but it felt new, like when you find the street of your childhood and realize you never noticed a certain tree that has always been there. We went to therapy. I say this without shame. Learning new words for old feelings isn't cowardice, it's craft. We learned to say "I get small" when you do that, without it meaning that the other person had forbidden something. We learned to let our son hear us apologize, not because we owed him a nice facade, but because we owed him to see real repair. Some days it was like lifting a moving box and realizing it's not as heavy as you feared. Other days everything hurt, but we stopped lying. One night after putting our son to bed, we were sitting in the living room with the curtains drawn. Emma laid her head in my lap and I stroked her hair. "How do we know it will last?" she asked. I looked at her profile, the strong and recognizable one, and said, "We don't know, we'll just pick it again tomorrow." She nodded. "Then I choose," she said. "You." I put my hand against her cheek. It was warm. I didn't think about the night she didn't come home. I thought about the morning we stood in the shower and she learned to breathe again. I thought that was enough. We don't live in a story with a neat bow. There will always be nights when a phone stays on too long. There will be glances in a meeting room that no one can control. But we have a new ritual. Every time we pass each other in the kitchen, we put a hand on the small of the other's back. Not to control, to say "I'm here." That gesture does more for me than any big words. It's our little elevator that goes up and up as long as we can push the button. And that night she didn't come home. It still lives in me, but it's not in charge. It does our slow kiss at the sink, her laughter when our son says a word wrong and insists it's right, my hand finding hers at midnight, not to take but to stay. If you ask me what I did when I thought I lost her, I answer, I didn't turn off the light in the living room. I left it on so we could find our way home.